A small village, after suffering severe damage, decided to spend all its savings to hire Flaming Dragon Fang, a powerful warrior group, to defeat Fenrir, an S-rank monster that had just appeared, sending people flying with its sheer power. Despite the difficulties, Bandana the fastest adventurer, Ma Felix the mage, and Golnova the flame warrior successfully defeated the terrifying monster. But what's shocking is that their group has one more member, Kurt. No, not that one, this one, the weakest of them all. His only job, handling minor tasks while the others save the world. And of course, he's our protagonist. Unfortunately, the next day, after humiliating him a little, his own party tells him that he's fired. Kurt doesn't understand why, but Golnova bluntly tells him the obvious. Someone so useless that he can't even defeat slimes has no place in this group. The others agree, finding him annoying. No matter how much Kurt begs to stay, they kick him out without mercy. Days later, our white-haired protagonist has no choice but to visit an adventurer agency in search of work. The receptionist begins an interview and an aptitude test. After asking for his name and background, she's surprised to hear that he used to work for Flaming Dragon Fang, especially since the group had just been promoted to SS rank. Even though Kurt feels ashamed about being fired, she assures him that his experience could help him find new opportunities. Now, it's time for the aptitude test. A crucial moment since these aptitudes are divine talents granted by the gods. Who knows, she might uncover hidden talents even Kurt himself never knew he had. Aptitudes range from G rank, lowest, to SS rank, highest. For example, a low-rank swordsman can't cut through hard materials, while a high-rank one can do it effortlessly. Kurt sees this as a new chance, unless... Oh no, everything is G rank, literally everything. Even the receptionist is stunned. He has zero talent in any combat category. She worries that he'll struggle to find a job, but encourages him not to lose hope. There are still tests for blacksmithing and alchemy, but since the examiner isn't available, he'll have to wait at least a week. Kurt explains that he has no money, so to help him out, the receptionist asks him to lift a sandbag. As soon as he does, he suddenly feels it draining his magic, getting heavier and heavier. To his surprise, she congratulates him. His strength is good enough for construction work. She quickly arranges a job offer for him at a border town wall repair project. When Kurt arrives, the site manager isn't convinced about hiring him, but since they desperately need workers, he lets him in. The job? Mix cement, repair the wall, and get paid based on performance. Slacking off is not an option. Kurt wonders if he should reinforce the cement with magic, but since the manager didn't mention it, he assumes it's such a basic step that it goes without saying. Determined not to disappoint, he puts in his best effort. Later, when the supervisor returns, he's completely shocked. Somehow, in just 3 hours, Kurt has used minimal materials and still finished 1/3 of the massive west wall. The blonde worker looks at him in disbelief and asks, "How the hell did you even reach the higher sections when there's no ladder?" Kurt explains that he prepared the cement, threw it up so it would stick, and then spread it out using a wooden pole. The supervisor is at a loss for words and asks how many days Kurt wants to work. Kurt responds that a week would be amazing. The supervisor thinks that's perfect and tells him he can take the rest of the day off. He also apologizes for the low pay, as it's all he can afford right now, but promises to send him a much larger payment later. Kurt is thrilled and plans to work even harder tomorrow. The next day, everyone is stunned by the progress. It doesn't make sense. The repairs are happening way too fast. The blonde worker tells Kurt that starting tomorrow, he doesn't need to come back. Kurt doesn't understand. Hasn't he been doing a good job? The supervisor explains that the wall repair project was meant to reduce unemployment in the area, but if things continue like this, Kurt will put everyone else out of work. Kurt still doesn't fully grasp the situation, but his boss tells him, "You work too well and too fast. What's an SS or even SSS rank guy doing here, fixing simple walls?" This is his final paycheck, and the supervisor suggests he go work in the capital instead. Kurt can't believe it. Back at the adventurer agency, Kurt notices a woman causing a scene. She's looking for miners to work in a mountain that hasn't shown any potential. Worse, she'll only pay if they find something, no advance payment, no guarantees. The receptionist advises her to find investors, but the woman explains that if she doesn't pay her taxes within a week, the entire mountain will be confiscated. She's desperate. Kurt immediately offers to work, but she refuses. She needs someone muscular. However, with no other options left, she reluctantly accepts. By the way, the receptionist's name is Kerschel, and she thinks Kurt is a genuinely good person who deserves better job opportunities. But her thoughts are interrupted because suddenly Kat receives a payment for his wall repairs. The amount, 200 gold coins. Kerschel is shocked and ends up tripping over 2 sandbags. Her colleague explains that those aren't normal sandbags. They're specially made to measure a person's magic level. The more magic someone has, the heavier the bags become. Ordinary people feel nothing, but only high-level mages can activate their true weight. In fact, they rarely even use this method because it only reacts at the level of royal-class spellcasters. Ketchup lifts the bag and realizes it's not that heavy for her. That means Kurt is hiding something far more interesting than anyone expected. At the mountain camp, Kurt and his new employer arrive at the mountain, but there's a problem. There's only one tent. The woman, Ulyssia, tells him it's more than enough for the 2 of them. Kurt awkwardly explains that he can't possibly sleep in the same place as such a beautiful woman. His words fluster Ulyssia, who quickly changes the subject and hands him something she cooked. Kurt is delighted. It's been a long time since someone prepared a meal for him. That night, he can't sleep, so he turns over to check if Ulyssia is still awake. And, well, what he sees leaves him so embarrassed that he rushes outside. After all, he's still a man. Ulyssia was actually testing him, and she's relieved to see that he's a good guy and even kind of sweet. The next morning, Ulyssia wakes up and realizes that Kurt slept outside all night. Not only that, but some of his clothes got ruined in the process, which she finds hilarious. After exchanging morning greetings, she tells him to get ready, they're about to start digging. Kurt asks if she has a strategy on where to start, but they start digging randomly, as if this were Minecraft. But no, the protagonist tells her that they can't just dig blindly. In fact, he's looking for something specific, so he asks her to follow him for a moment. After searching for a while, Kurt finds a rock with beautiful crystals inside, which could sell for up to 3 gold coins. Ulyssia can't believe that in just a short time, he's already found part of what she needs. After a few hours, the protagonist has extracted all the crystals from the rocks, and Ulyssia is eager to sell them. However, he asks her to wait, and she agrees since he did all the work. But that's not the reason. He explains that, because the crystals are small, they won't sell for much. Instead, he will turn them into magic crystals. Ulyssia mentions that there are fewer than 10 mages in the entire kingdom capable of doing that. But then, out of nowhere, the protagonist creates a magic crystal in just a few seconds. She is in total disbelief since even the smallest magic crystal normally takes at least an hour to make. The protagonist doubts this information, claiming he doesn't have much magic, but Ulyssia is starting to realize that they are not on the same page at all. By evening, they agree to meet the next day. She will sell the crystals, while the protagonist stays behind to do something else. Later, a guard questions Ulyssia about where the crystals were made and whether she has a certificate. She solves the issue by showing a symbol of adventurers affiliated with the crown. With her permit approved, she teleports to the capital. She soon arrives at the shop of Mimiko, an old acquaintance, to sell the crystals. Although Mimiko notices that the magic crystal has a faint glow, she decides to inspect it further. Ulyssia was expecting the crystals to be worth very little, but to her shock, Mimiko offers to buy them for 10 gold coins each. Ulyssia demands an explanation, as she expected them to be worth at most 4 silver coins. Mimiko explains that these crystals contain 10 times more magic than usual, and only glow faintly to prevent the magic from leaking out. Ulyssia reveals that she has 49 more crystals, but Mimiko has no problem with that. She immediately pulls out a bag with 500 gold coins. However, she makes two important requests. Ulysia must not sell these crystals to any other shop, as they wouldn't appraise them correctly. Mimiko also doesn't want such powerful crystals to circulate freely. She wants to know who created them. Ulysia refuses to reveal that information without the creator's permission. Mimiko then states that this is an order from a high-ranking court mage, equivalent to an honorary countess. Ulysia doesn't care about that and has no intention of obeying. Seeing that, Mimiko changes her approach. She asks as a friend. She wants Ulysia to protect the person behind these crystals and ensure that no other kingdom takes him away. She also informs her that both she and her colleagues would be willing to appoint him as the director of the Royal Institute of Magic. And that's not all. His Majesty himself would likely grant him the title of honorary count. Ulysia is stunned but agrees. Even later, she still can't believe what's happening with Kurt. She then returns to the job agency where the two receptionists are extremely curious about who Kurt really is. Since Ulysia has her symbol, Kiersel hands over all of Kurt's information to her. Now she knows that he was in an SS rank group and worked on constructing the city walls. However, she strictly instructs Kiersel to transfer all the gold coins to the protagonist and to never reveal any information about him, no matter who asks. Finally, she returns to the mountain camp, only to be shocked when she sees that the protagonist has built an entire house while she was away. She asks him if he thinks it's normal to build a house in just one night, and he casually replies that, at least in his village, it's completely standard. The poor girl doesn't know what to think anymore. Not long after, the Flaming Dragon Fang squad was getting completely overwhelmed by a massive monster. Golniver had taken some serious hits and wanted someone to patch him up, but Maleficus was too busy holding off the attacks from some creepy tree creature. Their leader was getting desperate and asked if the new guy could throw some fire spells. But the boy just reminded them that Golniver himself claimed he could handle that part. Outside the chaos, Bandana was eavesdropping and already writing them off in her mind. She figured they were done for. Meanwhile, Kurt was hit with a surprise. Someone actually wanted him to lead the Royal Magic Technology Lab. That meant fancy treatment, noble perks, the whole deal. Ulysia casually mentioned that the person who examined the crystal worked in the royal court, but only did it as a side gig. Kurt knew it was a huge opportunity. Still, deep down, he just didn't feel like it was for him. He couldn't picture himself bossing people around or being treated like royalty. Plus, he still felt kinda bad leaving the Flaming Dragon Fangs behind. On the outside, he just played it off and brought up his real concern, whether selling the crystals brought in enough to pay the taxes. Ulysia said she got a good price and handled the whole thing. She took a small cut for the effort and dumped the rest into Kurt's account. He thought it was too much, but she didn't feel right keeping all that gold. Anyway, she planned to keep mining and hoped Kurt would stick with her. He was all in, especially since he thought he spotted a good mineral patch the day before. Then she started worrying about how much rest he was getting. He said he got 6 hours of sleep, which totally caught her off guard, since he'd also built an entire house that day. Kurt thought she was mad because he overslept. After all, back with the Dragon Fangs, he only got 4 hours on a good day. He promised to make up for that extra rest time. Later, he took her to a spot in the mountains he thought was a good digging area. She couldn't see anything special there, but Kurt explained that, based on the shape of the mountain, there was probably something valuable underneath. He told her not to go deeper than 50 meters. She figured they'd be digging together, but Kurt had a different plan. He wanted to focus on the place where he found that massive crystal before. A few hours went by. Suddenly, Ulysia struck gold, or more accurately, topaz. She freaked out when she saw it, guessing it was worth at least 3 gold coins, and if Kurt turned it into a magic crystal for free, like he said he would, she'd hit her target with no problem. All excited, she caught herself feeling something more for Kurt, but she quickly pushed those feelings aside, laughing it off with a fake smile. Still, she followed him anyway, curious about what he'd done. Sure enough, the guy had basically built an entire mine by himself while she was gone. When she walked in, it was so bright inside that lanterns weren't even needed. Glowing moss covered the place. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. The tunnel was huge, way too massive for one guy to make in such a short time. Just then, Kurt showed up again, looking a bit bummed. All he found were boring rocks and a few tiny pieces of the stuff he was actually after. Yulisha checked out the weird-looking stones, and while they didn't seem useful, she had to admit they looked kinda pretty. Kurt nodded, saying, "They're everywhere anyway, so not worth much." When he casually called them Smithral, the boss nearly lost it. Mithral was supposed to be super rare, worth way more than gold or even platinum. Kurt shrugged, saying folks in his village tossed them out like trash. Yulisha, totally confused, asked what he was digging for then. He answered, "Orichalcum." That name hit her hard. It was the so-called metal of the gods, and she didn't even know it was buried in this mountain. Holding a sample, she remembered hearing that orichalcum could only be found if you dug really deep. She stared at Kurt, wondering if he'd actually done that in just 8 hours. He casually said yes, like it was no big deal, and added that he closed the tunnel after, since leaving it open would be dangerous. Looking around the area, she realized he'd tunneled across the whole mountain. 2 days later, Kurt finished his work and headed back to Samala with Yulisha. Turns out, the tunnel he dug connected Samala to Lord Akon's city. Yulisha figured they could let the Merchants Guild use it if they paid a maintenance fee. With that money, she could finally cover her taxes. Later, while walking through the streets, Kurt ran into Bandana. She told him she wasn't part of the Flaming Dragon Fangs anymore. A lot had happened. She remembered Gunova, their team leader, had once eaten at a cheap place, hated the food and left without paying. Later, he asked her if they still had any of the smoked meat Kurt had made, but she told him it was all gone. He'd eaten it himself. Annoyed, Gunova had drawn his sword and ordered Bandana to bring Kurt back, even saying it was fine to rough him up a bit if he didn't want to cook. Bandana, ever cool, said she'd handle it, and sneakily borrowed a teleport crystal from the boss without asking. As she left the alley, she saw guards searching for Gunova over the restaurant mess and thought that Maleficus had it easy, getting called to the church. With the group falling apart, she figured she'd only check on them when she felt like it. For now, she brushed it off and simply told Kurt she was fired, no need to drag him into her drama. Kurt felt kinda sad. He really respected Gunova and owed him a lot, so it sucked he couldn't go back. But Bandana had something else in mind. She knew a workshop that could use a hand. Apparently, there were only 15 8-layer Meisters in the whole country, big shots with official backing, and one of them was in trouble. Excited to finally be seen as useful, Kurt agreed right away. She gave him the address and off he ran, ready to help. Bandana stayed behind, thinking being an apprentice to a top-tier sage wouldn't be easy. While running, Kurt remembered that these 8 layers were places where they made magic stuff. Potions, gear, weapons, all that. The person in charge, an 8-layer Meister, had the same rank as a noble and serious responsibilities. He had no clue someone that important lived in this city. When he arrived at the place on the paper, it looked like a regular house. A sign said Atelier Ophelia. He knocked, and to his surprise, a really young girl opened the door. At first, he thought maybe she was the Meister, but she introduced herself as Michelle Lacada, the assistant. She noticed his surprised look and figured he just wasn't used to elves, but Kurt quickly explained that wasn't it. He just wasn't expecting someone so young to answer the door of such a big deal place. Kurt showed up to help out, just like Bandana had asked him to. The assistant was clearly relieved someone finally showed up and quickly pulled him inside. But the moment they reached the room, a nasty stench hit Kurt right in the face, and he pinched his nose. Turns out, what they really needed was someone to clean the kitchen. Disappointed, Kurt realized he wouldn't be doing anything fancy or magical, just scrubbing filth. While the assistant got called away by her boss, Kurt was left alone to deal with the disaster zone. Still, he didn't waste time, thumped his chest, threw on an apron, and got to work. In just 30 minutes, the whole place looked spotless. Not sure what else to do, he followed where the assistant had gone. He reached a door, knocked, and was told to come in. But when he stepped in, he was greeted by a girl wearing way less clothing than expected. A bit confused, she asked who he was. Embarrassed, Kurt quickly introduced himself and tried to apologize for barging in. She didn't seem to care, and casually said that Lady Ophelia had gone downstairs. That's when Kurt noticed a strange mark on her stomach. With her okay, he took a closer look and figured out it was a curse mark. She didn't seem to feel any pain, probably because the curse had already drained her too much. But her stomach still worked fine, judging by the loud growl it let out. Feeling bad, Kurt offered to make her something light to eat. Back in the kitchen, he suddenly realized he had been touching a naked girl earlier. That thought hit him like a brick, and in his daze he tripped over a stool and fell flat on his face. Meanwhile, Ulicia was at a meeting with a royal friend. She wanted to know how much the materials Kurt had found were worth. The purple-haired girl casually said 50,000 gold for the mithril and orichalcum. That number made Ulicia break into a cold sweat. She asked what would happen if word got out about Kurt's existence. The friend, Mimiko, bluntly said the boy could end up kidnapped, or worse. They were both shocked that someone with Kurt's crazy talent had stayed under the radar for this long. Ulicia mentioned he had been kicked out of the Flaming Dragon Fangs, which reminded Mimiko that the group's leader was being hunted. She wanted to know what Ulicia planned to do with the kid. Ulicia figured giving him the role of Atelier Meister might be a good idea. Better to keep him busy and grounded than risk him drawing too much attention. She even wanted to be his bodyguard, but had no idea how to make him accept, especially since the kid didn't even know how amazing he was. Back at the workshop, Kurt was finishing up the meal when Michelle returned with a tall woman. Both were shocked at how clean the kitchen was. He asked if the tall lady was Ophelia, which she confirmed. He apologized for using the kitchen without asking, explaining it was just to feed the girl in the back room. Ophelia was stunned he'd met her and made it clear that no one should know about the girl. Kurt agreed to keep it secret. Impressed, Ophelia paid him generously and asked him to come again the next day. After he left, she regretted letting the cursed girl meet anyone, especially since she had to keep the situation under control. She took the food to the girl's room and told her to stop opening the curtains, or someone might spot her. Seeing her loose pajamas, Ophelia knelt to fix them, but the girl's stomach growled again, making her laugh. Before handing over the food, Ophelia checked to make sure it wasn't poisoned, but the girl insisted she trusted the boy. Her gut told her he was a good guy. After all, she already felt like her body was breaking apart from the curse. What harm could a little food do? The girl didn't know who cursed her. She had always doubted everyone around her, but for once, she wanted to believe in someone. As the smell of the porridge hit her nose, she guessed it had herbs in it. One bite and she was in love. Her chest warmed up, and for a moment, she felt normal. But just as Ophelia was about to leave, the girl started choking and dropped to the floor. Ophelia panicked, thinking the food was really poisoned. Anger and guilt mixed inside her as she rushed to find an antidote, blaming herself and cursing Kurt in her head. Then suddenly, the girl stood up, completely fine. The curse mark? Gone. Ophelia was stunned. Somewhere else, a man in a black cloak was furious. The curse had broken, and his boss wasn't happy. They weren't going to wait for another plan. They'd find another way to make sure the girl didn't live. Not long after, Ophelia visited Mimiko to talk about what happened, and found Ulicia there too. A mysterious woman in a cloak removed her hood. Both Mimiko and Ulicia immediately dropped to one knee. It was the third princess, Lieselot. Mimiko thought she was still sick, but Ophelia explained she had been cursed by someone who wanted her dead. Lieselot was the only child of the king and Princess François from the Gudamacha Empire. Her very existence kept peace between the two nations, so if something happened to her, it could start a new war, especially now that the battle with the northern country had just ended. Ulicia quickly connected the dots. Someone wanted to spark chaos again. Mimiko was just glad the princess was alive and hugged her. Lieselot said she needed their help to find out who cursed her. Mimiko didn't hesitate. She swore her loyalty to both Lieselot and her late mother, Princess François. Then, Lieselot surprised them again. She said the curse broke thanks to someone named Kurt. Both women were speechless. Mimiko and Ulicia were totally taken aback. Things had taken a crazy turn, and they had to explain how the princess got better after eating some porridge made by Kurt. Seriously, that simple meal somehow lifted the curse she was under. Now, the big question was, who had tried to curse Princess Lieselot in the first place? Whoever it was clearly knew their stuff and had enough power to mess with the palace's magical defenses. Mimiko had 3 suspects in mind. First up was Sanova Riskhats, a high-ranking military commander with connections everywhere. Then there was Bishop Tristan Madoff, a big deal in the church who might have had followers messing with the spell protections around the princess's room. Lastly, there was Queen Isadora Arcana, the king's third wife, who could easily move around the palace without raising any eyebrows. Ophelia thought Tristan might have sent someone to secretly tamper with things. Lies pointed out that Queen Isadora could have slipped into the room without anyone noticing. But Sanova was the tricky one. How would a soldier like him pull off something in such a secure place? That's when Ulyshiasha mentioned the Thieves Guild. Apparently, Sonova had ties with them, and they were known for sneaking in and out of places they shouldn't be, plus they were great at bribing people inside the palace. Since it was too early to figure out who was behind everything, Ophelia came up with a clever plan: a trap. Liselott had just turned 15, which meant she had to go on a year-long training journey outside the palace. They decided to set up a fake training ground with a made-up mentor. The idea was simple: if someone was spying on Liselott, they'd start looking into this fictional mentor. But since he didn't exist, there wouldn't be any real info to find. This confusion would hopefully buy them time to uncover the real threat. Mimiko pointed out that if the enemy sent someone to dig for info and found nothing, they'd know something was off, which would help expose them. To sell the lie better, they needed fake documents for this imaginary mentor. That's when Ulyshiasha pulled out a magical crystal that could help create the identity. Ophelia was blown away by how good the item was, and the shock didn't stop there. It was made by Kurt. Again, jaws dropped. Later, Kurt showed up at Ophelia's workshop, only to find a note saying it was closed due to an emergency. While he stood there wondering what was going on, Michelle appeared and told him that her master had to leave suddenly. She felt bad, but there was no work for him at the moment. Feeling a bit useless, Kurt walked off, thinking he had messed up and probably got kicked out. But his growling stomach reminded him it was time to eat, so he headed to a local diner, hoping some food would cheer him up. While he was eating, he overheard a group of adventurers at a nearby table stressing out. They needed to deliver some heavy materials for a dungeon run, but their usual helper was out sick for a week. Canceling would cost them money they couldn't afford to lose. One girl suggested they carry the stuff themselves, but the guy reminded her they'd be easy targets for monsters if they did that while loaded down. Kurt listened for a bit and then walked over, offering to help as their carrier. He admitted he wasn't great in a fight, but he was built like a tank when it came to hauling stuff. The girl rolled her eyes, clearly doubting him, until her teammate reminded her that she was the same age as Kurt and shouldn't underestimate him. The guy apologized for his sister's rudeness and explained that their mission involved hunting stone beasts that weighed over 200 kilos, so they needed someone strong. Kurt just smiled and said he could prove himself. Without waiting, he lifted one of the guys like it was nothing, then hoisted the other, the one in full armor. Everyone in the diner stopped and stared, shocked. With that display, he earned their trust. The group introduced themselves. The armored guy was Kanz, who preferred punching things over using his sword. Then there was Danzo, the calm leader, and a samurai from the east. Finally, the girl was Senna, a quick-footed ranger who handled scouting and archery. Kanz welcomed Kurt into the team and mentioned their squad was called Secura. He also said their regular hauler, Bennick, was out sick for a week, so Kurt was stepping in. Kurt gave a shy nod and said thanks, calling himself just a regular guy, which made everyone laugh, leaving him a bit confused. Kanz playfully tapped him on the head and told him they were counting on him, which made Kurt quietly promise himself not to mess anything up with these cool new teammates. A little while later, the team arrived at their mission spot, a dark cave entrance covered in thick moss and slippery rocks. As they stepped inside, Kurt accidentally squished a blob creature and got his foot stuck. Senna, the ranger, casually mentioned that he just needed to hit its weak spot. But instead of helping himself, Kurt clumsily jabbed his own leg with his weapon. Senna sighed and took care of it, muttering that while she had heard he was bad at fighting, this was next-level clumsiness. Despite the mishap, Kanz and Danzo didn't get upset. They reminded Kurt that his job was to do the heavy lifting while they handled the danger. Kurt was surprised by their chill attitude. Back with his old group, even small mistakes would have gotten him yelled at. This felt different. Once inside the cave, Senna used some glowing moss to light up the tunnel, making the walls sparkle green. As they moved deeper, Kurt noticed something strange on the wall. Before he could take a closer look, a goblin jumped out. Senna quickly took it down, and Danzo finished it off. But then they heard a lot of goblin noises coming from behind them. They weren't just facing a few, they were surrounded. With no way to escape, they had to stand and fight. But Kurt suddenly remembered the odd wall and ran back to check it out. After a bit of searching, he found a hidden tunnel. He called for the others, but only Senna hurried over and slipped inside with him, shutting the hidden door before the others could catch up. On the other side, Kanz told Danzo they couldn't outrun the goblins. They had to hold their ground. Kurt wanted to stay and help, but Senna told him straight up that he wasn't ready. He couldn't even handle a slime, and if he stayed, he'd just slow everyone down. Kurt didn't argue, but it stung to hear that. Still, he could see how much Sena wanted to stay and fight with her team. Outside the hidden door, Kans asked Danzo if he had any regrets. Danzo said no and asked Kans the same. Kans smiled, saying he'd always be proud of protecting his little sister. Danzo nodded, adding that dying with purpose was the best way for a warrior to go. Kurt, overhearing this, felt shaken. They treated him like one of them, without hesitation, even if he felt useless in a fight. As they moved through the secret path, Sena lit the way, only to realize too late that the path ended near a nest of metal dragons, huge creatures made of iron and fire. Meanwhile, back in town, Ulyshiasha and Lieselotte arrived at the inn where Kurt had been staying. The elder told the princess to keep her identity hidden for now. Lieselotte agreed and decided to go by lies to keep things low-key. Excited to see Kurt again, she rushed to his room, only to find it empty. Just then, someone outside the door mentioned that Kurt had gone on a mission with a team up north, in the caves. Lieselotte ran outside to see who knocked, but by the time she got there, no one was around. She felt a strange sense that something was off. Still, if Kurt was really in that cave, and since training had recently happened in that area, there was a good chance leftover monsters like goblins might still be lurking around. That made her even more determined to find him. Technically, Lise was supposed to stay back in town, but Lieselotte didn't want to be away from the one she was meant to protect. Plus, she wasn't helpless. She had been learning magic since she was a kid, so she insisted on going along. Eventually, her bodyguard gave in, but warned her to stick close no matter what. After a bit of hiking, they finally reached the cave where people said Kurt had gone. The glowing moss on the walls looked fresh, like someone had just walked through. Lise even spotted some boot prints and confidently said they were Kurt's. Yuli didn't question how she knew. It was clear Lise had a knack for this kind of thing. As they got closer to the ruins, Lise struggled to follow the trail. So she activated one of her tracking abilities to pick up any clues. Suddenly, she caught a familiar scent and took off running. Yuli just followed, amazed at how well Lise could remember someone's smell. As they moved deeper into the cave, they started to hear faint sounds of fighting echoing through the tunnel. Lieselotte paused, ready to jump in. Before they went any further, Lise used her magic to give Yuli a boost in strength, just in case. Meanwhile, inside the cave, Kans and Danzo were battling a swarm of angry goblins. Just when things were looking tough, Yuli showed up and helped turn the tide. Farther in a hidden tunnel, Sena and Kurt were facing something way worse than goblins. Giant metal golems that looked like dragons. Sena felt completely overwhelmed and guilty, thinking she had led Kurt into a dangerous situation. But instead of panicking, Kurt stepped up. To Sena's surprise, he ran right at one of the monsters, dodged a heavy swing, and started taking it apart like it was a machine. He removed parts one by one, first the tail, then the armor, then the head. He wasn't fighting in the usual way. He knew exactly where to strike to make it fall apart. Sena watched in disbelief as he dismantled them one after another like he had done this before. Kurt explained that he used to work in a mining town and had dealt with machines like these for years, which is why he knew what to do. Just then, Ulyshiasha caught up with them and saw what was happening. Sena told her that Kurt had taken out all the golems by himself, and Ulyshiasha remembered a legend about a guy who was terrible at fighting but had amazing skills in gathering and crafting. She started to wonder if Kurt was that guy. Soon after, Lieselotte arrived and was blown away by what she saw. Her eyes lit up. Kurt wasn't just skilled, he was something special. Once the whole group was back together, Kans felt a bit guilty for not knowing there were so many goblins hiding out in the northeast. But Ulyshiasha told Kurt she was opening a new workshop and wanted him to work with her. Kurt mentioned he was already part of Team Secura, but Kans encouraged him to take the opportunity. It was a rare chance. Ulyshiasha even invited the rest of the team to help out at the workshop. The guys seemed excited about it, but Sena stood off to the side, looking a bit down. When asked about it, Ulyshiasha suggested that Kurt should take an aptitude test once they got back. Back in town, Kurt stopped by a fancy workshop run by a royal court mage named Mimiko. She mentioned that she had seen the kind of magical crystal he made before and wanted to meet the person behind it. That night, the group held a small celebration to mark the completion of their mission and the invitation to the new workshop. Even though everyone was in high spirits, Senna still looked a bit down. Maybe because she sensed that things were changing quickly. Later, Mimiko handed Kurt's test results to Yuli. Most of his skills, like cooking, mining, and cleaning, came out as B rank, while the rest was C rank. But when they checked his potential, they found that the machine couldn't even read it. It maxed out at SSS, meaning Kurt's abilities were way above average. Even his magic power was stronger than any mage in the royal court. Yuli had a feeling this was the case, but now it was confirmed. He was the perfect fit to lead the secret workshop. Mimiko was relieved she was the one who tested him, saying that if someone else had seen those results, it could have caused some serious issues. Just then, someone else walked in and noticed the test results. Mimiko and Yuli quickly acted like they were just finding out about it too, and told the staff to forget what they had seen. The worker quickly covered her ears and pretended she hadn't heard anything. And that wraps up today's episode. Thanks for tuning in.